The name Floyd King, born in Coloma, Wisconsin, 23rd of November 1928. I was raised in Coloma. I'm old fogey. In 47, I started working in carpenter work. And probably about late 47 or early 48, I started working at the Phillips 66 station. And I stayed there until late 48s, early 49s, and I went down to Fort Atkinson and worked. I got my draft notice that I was going to be drafted. I tried to find a different job, but the first thing it would ask me is, what is your service status? And I'd say, I don't have any. They said, well, we're not interested in you. Checked with the draft board at Watoma, and I was the 21st on the list. Got disappointed. I went down to the listing board downtown in Fort Atkinson, and the only guy that was there was the Air Force man. So I talked to him and said, well, I'll write the test. So I wrote the test, and they let me know that I had passed it. I took the papers, went back home again. They had my dad and mother sign off. I was supposed to go for my physical here. My folks took me down to Fort Atkinson. I didn't take anything with me because I figured, well, it'll be the same thing as what I had with the Army. I'll be physical and then I'll be going back home, because that's what they told me, that I'd probably have a couple of weeks after I had my physical before they would call me into the Air Force. Got down there and we ran our physicals. They lined us up and they said, all right, all you gentlemen who are married, fall out here. So a lot of them fell out. Now all of you who are living on farms, fall over here. So we did. He says, all the rest of you line up over here. So they dismissed them other ones that for the farm and for the married. Then he said, now, he looked at us guys, and he said, we'll go down and eat now, then we'll be going on the train. The next thing I know, after we ate, we're heading for Texas, Blackland Air Force Base. I've got nothing with me, no shaving equipment, nothing at all with me, except my billfold. Well, I got in there in November when I went in, and for Christmas time, I already had my orders shipping to Alaska. We were all set and waiting to get shipped out. I was going to go as an A&E mechanic. And one morning we got called out and says, return all your stuff back in, you're not going to Alaska. Then we spent a whole month at Camp Stoneman, which was a shipping point to overseas. Then we got our orders to go back to Denver Air Force Base at Laurie. And on the train, the sergeant talked to us and told us what we could do. They said, well, tell you what, if you take to the Air Police, when the gunnery school opens up, you'll get your chance to go to work and go apply for that. Well, you guys all know what that type of a promise is in the service. Signed up for the Air Police. I got a job there working for investigation section. And I was there for, gosh, over a year, I think. Met my wife there in Denver at that time. And we made up our mind that I was going to go to work and get my overseas duty in before we got married. And I went to work and signed up for every month and never got picked. Always got stayed in Denver, always stayed in Laurie. Finally, I checked with them and they said, well, you got the wrong AFSC to match your rank, so you can't ship on that. Well, there was nothing I could do about it. We made up our mind we'd get married anyway. And through that process, we get it all set, and then I get my orders to ship to Evil Japan. So I pretty well figured out where that was. It was going to be Korea. And so July of '52, I shipped out for Korea. And I was at K8, better known as Kunsan. And I was there then from 52, in July of '52, until August, I think, of '53. During that time, I've done different things, patrol with air police, worked in the office quite a bit for the old man, and then they transferred me over into the prison to be the prison, I don't know what you would call it, warden or whatever. Well, there was an accident happened at K8 in the B-26s, and they were loading them up one afternoon, or right around noon, and they went to work and dropped one after it was half hung, and it fused itself on the way down to the ground before it hit the ground, and it set off. We lost about, I think, four B-26s that day down there in the flight line, and plus some of the F-84s, which were parked in an L shape to it. But they don't think they lost any F-84s to the point where they were destroyed. They just had to be repaired. But the B-26s were gone. They actually blew them up. But we went down there quick to pull them planes all out of there, because there was probably about 26 of them sitting in a row. But then we also, when I was at Denver, we had a B-29 there that crashed, coming in for landing. And it crashed into the residential area of Denver. And that was a bad one. They lost all the lives because they took the tops off the homes on one side of the street, went through the house on the second side on the other side of the street, and almost got to the next house on the block. And all that stuff from that one house fell on top of the plane, so it was rough. It was rough. And then I don't think any of the crew on the B-29 lived in that one. But then before I got ready to come home, they came over to Korea where I was at, was a F-94, with an afterburner on it. And I kind of nosed around down there, and the guy said, well, if you want to go, we'll get you set up. So I got a chance to ride. And it was a ride I'll never forget. I never looked to ride with another fighter jet, to tell you that, to that one. Our folks in those years wouldn't let us take a car alone until we're 21 years of age. And then usually boss sat in the seat beside you to watch you. Here we were turning $1 million planes over to 18, 19, 20-year-old guys to fly combat. I don't think people back home ever even realized that what was going on. That they could go to work and turn a piece of property like that loose to a kid who you didn't even trust with your car. Well, then I got my orders to come home. Went to Selfridge Air Force Base. From Selfridge Air Force Base, we got transferred to Kansas, to Olathe Naval Air Station there. And I was there then until I got my discharge. I wanted to stay in. I was going to make it 20 years out of it. By that time I'd come back. Before I went over in Korea, I was already married. When we come back, we talked it over, and she was like the life. She was getting to see countryside, moving around a lot. So I figured, okay, but I've had 4 years of Air Force work. I didn't want any more of it. I want to get into mechanics, A&E mechanics. I said, you guys moved me around enough that my AFSC got right to go over to Korea. So I said, you can do this for me too, if you want to. I said, the company's orders that says that I can become an A&E mechanic, and I'll go wherever you say. Well, they wouldn't do it. They said, well, you take your discharge here at Olathe in Kansas, and you go up to Cheyenne and Wyoming and re-up up there. So I thought, well, that's the way it is, and I'm out of there. They weren't too happy about that because they were losing 6 guys out of Olathe alone. They were staff sergeants. Most of the models that you got are all from Korean area. Then, of course, I pretty well got that covered, and then we started going into the jet age. Well, I started putting them together. I'd done craft work, for quite a while after Mother died. And then that kind of petered out. And then I was putting planes together and starting just to put the planes together, and my daughter Brenda says to me, what did you used to put together? Because during the Second World War, we used to put planes together. I was still in high school yet, those years. And I said, well, I sure would like to find a balsa product that we used to make where there's a string balsa. But I guess I didn't say the word string, I just said balsa. And Brenda understood that I wanted a balsa plane. Well, so they buy me a full flying P-51. It took me over a year to put this thing together. And from then on, then after a while, I started getting magazines in the mail about different places where I can buy models. And all of a sudden, I found something that was stringers, and I made, two or three of those that I found that I put together. So that's where I really got started. And of course, before I found them balsa jobs, I was already into the plastic models pretty heavy. When I started collecting to put together these models, what I was intending to do was to put all the planes together that we had at Korea during that time. They had B-29s there. Our B-29s were coming out of Okinawa. There was quite a sight to see them come over, heading north to the front line, which was probably about 110 miles north of us from where we were. F-80s, I think it was a trainer in a way. The B-26s, which was what they considered a medium bomber. They had F-84s there, which was considered a fighter bomber, which was a jet. There was a squadron there for them. We also had the Australians flying P-51s yet. It was nothing to see them come back pretty well shot up. The B-52s were just coming into being. And the B-52s were coming out of Okinawa then. We had the C-119 there. They also had C-124. That was just coming into being. They were having a lot of problems with that one. In fact, that's the one that I had when I flew out of Korea back to Japan on my way home. And then, of course, our old workhorse was our C-47s, the old DC-3. That was the one that we used an awful lot over there. They brought our supplies in with that and stuff like that. We were about, flying time from Seoul, we were probably about 20 minutes. I remember one time when the alarm sounded that we should hit the foxholes, and we had got so used to that already because planes were coming back shot up and the radios were shot out of them and stuff like that. That if they couldn't pick them up on radar, then we got warning to get out into the foxholes. Well, we got to the point where we didn't bother to go down to the foxhole nor we sat on the edge, on the sandbanks around them. One afternoon we were sitting there and with a warning out. All of a sudden there was a scream and it was all over with. And we looked up at the sky and we said, what in the world was that? Probably about 20 of those guys sitting there. Well, we got called in front of a formation a little while after that, and they says, you airmen all realized that you could all been wiped out just now. What you seen was F-86, and they brought a fleet down from up north and gave us a bypass of what they looked like. That's the first I seen an F-86. That B-39 was a big beast. That was a big beast. They flew that over Laura Air Force Base for Armed Forces Day one year. And the first pass he made, probably about, I would say maybe 400 feet off the ground, off the runway. He done slowly. And he made a round out, came back again the second time. When he got about halfway down the runway, he opened up full throttle, broke 32 windows with the tower. But that's about my life as far as the service is connected. But I can't ever say that I'm sorry that I went to that. Now the VA takes care of me, and it helps a lot. When you get to by my age, you got a lot of drugs, you got a lot of... So I can't say that I'm sorry that I ever went to service. The only thing is, it was an awful fast trip. They tell me I was going to go back home again. The next thing I know, I'm in Texas.